Hello and welcome to another episode of Ask the Prof. This one coming to you from my hopefully temporary office. We just moved to Castle Rock, Colorado, so we're still getting situated and sorted, so that's where we're at now. But it's been a little while since I've done an actual Ask the Prof video rather than just race updates. I did a series of 4 races in 4 weeks, and so that kind of consumed everything, and then add a move in along with that. So I wanted to get back and get another one of these review type videos in there. And since my last video on my pre-run series, I've gotten quite a few questions about the hip hook that I used and showed in my pre-run warm-up, and specifically how the hip hook compares to the Rite. And so that's what this video is going to be about today, is going to compare the two and talk a little bit about the strengths and weaknesses of both of them. So let's start a little bit again with the anatomy of the hip flexor. Both of these tools are advertised to help the iliopsoas region. The iliopsoas is 2 muscles. You have the psoas and then the iliacus. All right, and you have to remember that these 2 muscles are going to talk to each other. That'll come into play a little bit later in this discussion. All right, these 2 muscles are primarily a hip flexor. You can commonly develop, or it's really common to develop a contracture with these, or just where these muscles stay in a contracted position. That happens due to being in a shortened position for long periods of time. Nowadays, it's very common that people are sitting in a desk all day long or for long periods of time, and that can cause that contraction. But it can also be caused by like being in a shortened position like you are when you're cycling for long periods of time and things like that. This contracture is going to have a couple things that it can do. It can limit hip extension, which is going to negatively affect your running. And also is going to put you in a little bit of a worse position in the water for swimmers as well. This contracture can also cause quite a bit of lumbar pain, especially, for me personally, I notice this a lot when I'm sitting in aero position on the bike. When my iliopsoas starts to get tight, my low back starts to scream at me quite a bit. So the hip hook and the Rite were both designed to try to release this contracture. So next we need to take a quick look into the literature and see if there's anything that's been said about how to deal with this contracture, and then see if that can apply to either of these 2 products that have been out there advertising that they can. All right, so Ward in 2003 suggested that the application of this are a little bit blunt. It's a little bit hard to see in this picture and normalize and reflex actually have a Rite here at the house to get rid of the contracture. Dowling also in 2000 suggested that constant pressure into a fairly large area increase the output. Right, and remember that Holmich suggested we need to get as deep into the tissue as possible, and to do that, we need to be a little bit more Holmich and colleagues suggested that be able to you need to get as deep into the tissue as possible. And he suggested using fingers rather than your palm. And that's going to be important because that's where we come up to the first difference between these 2 products. If you take a look at the Rite, you'll see that the ends are fairly large and blunt. I apologize for not having one of these at the house, but hopefully these 2 pictures can give you a little bit of the gist of what I'm talking about. Remember that Holmich suggested that they need to get deep into the muscle in order to be able to effectively release the iliopsoas. That's going to be harder with a blunt end. So in fact, there's been a few reports of the Rite putting a little bit too much pressure on the femoral nerve, which has led to some temporary numbness. So if we compare that to the hip hook, you'll see the hip hook is much more finger-like, where, remember, Holmich suggested using fingers for direct pressure rather than a palm. So again, there's no research studies out there yet. These are both relatively new. They haven't been reviewed thoroughly in the research. So this is me trying to apply the research directly to 2 different products and just kind of show a difference. All right, so the way that I would look at this is the Rite would be like trying to do a psoas release with the palm, whereas the hip hook, you can do it more so like the fingers. When you go to get any sort of manual therapy done on the psoas region, you're going to, the therapist is going to use their fingers. All right, so that would put a little bit of a leaning towards the hip hook for the psoas specifically. To demonstrate the next major difference between the two tools, we need to go back to the anatomy picture here. All right, we've talked about the psoas muscle, which has a origin on the lumbar spine. We haven't talked too much about the iliacus muscle. And in my opinion, that's really ignored in all of the conversations when we talk about the hip flexor. Remember, I mentioned earlier that these two muscles communicate with each other, and you can't release the psoas and expect the iliacus to release on its own. And if you just release the psoas and the iliacus is also has a contracture, the psoas is going to develop the contracture within minutes to hours again. All right, it's not going to stay released. So we need to be able to address them both. So this simple graphic is going to show how you can use the hip hook to address both the iliacus and the psoas separately. It shows how you can use the body's weight to apply the constant pressure that Ward and Dowling suggested, while also showing how you can pinpoint the tissues specifically that Holmich discussed. So the purpose of this video is not to bash on the Rite in any way. It's actually a pretty good tool. If you go to the Rite website, which I'll include in the link below, you can download a manual and look at about 50 different actions that you can use, or different areas that you can target with the Rite. Some of them are actually quite good. The hamstring, the quadratus lumborum, the calf, just to name a few. All those can be really effectively addressed with the Rite. But when it comes down to it, specifically trying to address the iliopsoas, my choice is going to go with the hip hook for the reasons described in this video. That's all I have for you today. As always, please leave a comment below, hit the subscribe button. If you want to see some specific product reviewed, leave that in the comments as well.